Let's bring in our panel now. CNN political analyst and Washington bureau chief for the Daily Beast, Jackie Kucinich, CNN senior political analyst and senior editor of The Atlantic, Ron Brownstein, and politics editor at The Root, Jason Johnson. He's also professor of politics at Morgan State University. All right, Jackie, let's start with you. Certainly the smoke is getting thicker regarding possible collusion between the Trump campaign and Russian officials, but is there any fire yet?
I think that depends on who you talk to, but really, because of how this investigation has been structured, this lies primarily with the Senate Intelligence Committee. They've been looking into this. They've been relatively quiet about it to avoid kind of blowing up the investigation, much like it happened on the House side. And the more you hear about these things like Pam was just talking about, the less good it is for the Trump administration, because anytime we're talking about his advisors and the Russian government, it's not a good look for them.
Ron Brownstein, to you, my friend, just summing up this week, it's been a remarkable week when you look at sort of the reversal of course of this administration on a number of economic policies, a number of words they choose to use to describe China and such, but also on this core principle that the president got elected on, and that is the principle of America first. Just take a look at this map, because this is going to show us all the countries where we have seen U.S. military action under this president in 80-odd days. You know, is this America first, Ron Brownstein?
Well, look, I mean, we are seeing an incredible amount of change at an unbelievable pace on many fronts. But the pace, first of all, on many of the policy issues, particularly on trade and international alliance, the change is in a very consistent direction. It is away from the populist nationalist themes, the America First themes that he ran on, toward a more conventional Republican outlook on America's interactions with the world. I mean, that has been the magnetic pull away from those kind of distinctive notes of his campaign back into the fold. Immigration is a big exception, where under Attorney General Jeff Sessions, he is still motoring down the path that he set during the campaign. But on these other fronts, you are seeing, I think, the kind of the impact of the lack of an infrastructure in the Republican Party for those ideas. There really is not kind of much there in Congress or think tanks or interest groups that want to push in this direction. All the push is in the other direction, and that's where you're seeing the president move. On the military force, look, I think what he said during the campaign was he was not going to get involved on the ground. He is not going to try to reshape societies, but he would try to strike from afar from America, from those he views, for those we view as America's enemies. And I think that is the pattern that we are seeing. No, but the overall tenor is, I think, more activist, I agree, than we kind of felt during the campaign.
It's an important point, though. You're right. Because
lots of attitudes and beliefs that President Trump has that may or may not be healthy for America. But the way in which he consistently changes his opinion, sometimes within 24 hours, who's our enemy, who isn't, what newspapers are fake news and what aren't, it makes it a very dangerous and volatile world for our enemies, because no one knows whether you can trust him. For our allies, they don't know if they can trust him. For the Republican Party in Congress, they don't know what's going to come out of his mouth. There's nothing wrong with a president changing his mind. There is something wrong with a president changing his mind without any sort of logic behind it and failing to explain it to the people he's got to work with.
So the question becomes, who is tipping the balance? Who is influencing, if anyone? It could just be the president. But if it is someone, who's tipping the president this way? I mean, there's so much reporting out. A fascinating piece in the Washington Post this morning about Gary Cohn, former Goldman Sachs president, who has, by the way, donated a lot of money to Democrats and Republicans, right? I mean, he says in meetings, I'm not a Democrat, I'm not a Republican, I like to get things done. Jackie, to you, is this the Gary Cohn, the rise of Gary Cohn?
Yeah, in fairness, so did President Trump. It donated to Democrats and Republicans before he ran as a Republican. But you do see the rise of this more moderate traditional Republican and Democrat stances on everything from Chinese currency manipulations this week. He said he's going to keep the Exim Bank. That was something he said during the campaign trail that could be done away with. There are several. He said that Janet Yellen would likely stay on. So you are seeing this rise of the Jared Kushner, Gary Cohn ideology really starting to take hold and become real policy. And at the same time, you're seeing Steve Bannon and the folks around him go under the radar. I had a former Trump staffer say to me once that you want to get close to the sun, but you don't want to fly too close to the sun. And it seems like Bannon got a little too close.
Well, another contrast emerged yesterday regarding WikiLeaks, and its founder and the new CIA chief talked about that. Let's listen to what Mike Pompeo said yesterday, swinging for the fences against WikiLeaks.
Now, this just came out. WikiLeaks, I love WikiLeaks. By the way, did you see another one? Another one came in today. This WikiLeaks is like a treasure trove.
It's time to call out WikiLeaks for what it really is: a non-state hostile intelligence service often abetted by state actors like Russia.
So certainly in stark contrast there, Ron, does this contradict what the president said, or is this kind of more, again, the education of a president?
No, I think it simply contradicts what the president said, and unequivocally and directly. It reminds the entire arc of this story, from the very first WikiLeaks releases through where we are now, with these continuing reports of investigation of possible collusion between the Trump campaign and the Russian sources that were involved in the leaks, reminds me so much of what we saw where I live in Los Angeles, what we saw in the North Korean hack of Sony, where initially everyone was just, kind of salivating over the salacious details of what was revealed in the internal workings, and gradually came to realize the real story was how they got all that in the public view in the first place. And the magnitude of the threat that, leaving aside any question of the immediate political impact on President Trump, the idea that the Russian government felt that it could, in fact, penetrate and disrupt the American electoral system, because if nothing else, they have spread enormous doubt and clouds over this election. They have similar efforts underway in Europe with their elections. I mean, this is a genuine new threat that we simply were not prepared for. And if you go back to your first story, I mean, the British intelligence are complaining that the CIA and the FBI were very slow to act on the information they provided them. This is a real issue. And we saw the president, during the campaign kind of welcome it, when in fact it should have been a moment of concern for all Americans, regardless of who gained a tactical advantage over it.
Yeah. All right, guys, thank you very much. Jackie Kucinich, Ron Brownstein, Jason Johnson. Have a great weekend.